All right, let's jump right in. Today, we are talking about one of the most fascinating and, honestly, one of the weirdest folk heroes in history, the Buddhist monk Gong. This is a guy who just completely shatters every single idea you might have about what a monk is supposed to be.
You know, when you picture a Buddhist monk, you probably think of someone calm, disciplined, maybe a vegetarian, definitely sober. Okay, now take that image in your head and just completely throw it away. Because Gong was the literal opposite. He was a chaotic, meat-eating, wine-guzzling rule breaker who looked more like a homeless guy than a holy man.
He basically lived by this one, simple but pretty radical motto: wine and meat pass through the intestines, Buddha remains in the heart. His whole philosophy was that what you do on the outside doesn't really matter, as long as your heart is in the right place, as long as you're all about compassion and justice. This was his justification for, well, pretty much everything he did.
So let's really get into just how different this monk was. I love how the source material calls him a character design collapse, which is just perfect.
Okay, so his appearance was legendary. We're talking raggedy, patched-up robes that were greasy and basically falling apart. And he was never, ever seen without his trusty wine gourd. His behavior was so erratic that he earned the nickname G Dian, which pretty much means Crazy G. And for him, all those strict monastery rules, yeah, they were more like gentle suggestions that he was free to ignore completely. So this brings up the biggest question of his story, right? You have to be wondering, why on earth would the other monks, and especially the head abbot, tolerate this guy? He was breaking every rule in the book, a total mess. There had to be a really, really good reason.
Well, the answer, and this is where it gets super interesting, is actually in his past. Because before he was Crazy J, he was someone else entirely.
Get this, his birth name was Li Shu Yuan. He wasn't born a beggar. He was born into a super powerful and wealthy family during the Southern Song dynasty. He was supposed to be handsome, educated. He had a life of total luxury just handed to him on a silver platter.
And this is what makes his story so powerful. His whole raggedy appearance, it wasn't because he was poor. It was a choice. He deliberately walked away from a life of comfort and silk robes to become a monk at the famous Lingyan temple. They gave him the name Daoji. So his crazy behavior, it wasn't actual madness. It was all intentional. And this is where we finally get the answer to our question. The monastery put up with him because underneath that whole crazy act was something incredible. He was a hero in disguise.
Gong basically had two full-time jobs, and he was amazing at both. First, he was like a walking, talking emergency room. People would come to him with diseases nobody could cure, and he'd fix them with a simple herbal mix, or sometimes just a sip of wine from his magic gourd. And second, he was a vigilante for the little guy, using his powers to hilariously punish corrupt officials and greedy bullies.
He had this method that was simple but so effective. He'd find someone who was abusing their power, use his supernatural abilities to pull some kind of wild, often very funny prank on them, and bam! Justice is served, and the common folk are safe again. He wasn't just crazy, he was a master of divine chaos.
But of all the legends about him, there is one story that stands way above the rest. It's the miracle that really sealed his reputation as a living Buddha, and it involves a whole lot of flying wood.
So here's the setup. The Jingxi temple, where Gong was living, had burned to the ground. To rebuild it, they needed these huge logs of timber. The problem? The best wood was in Sichuan province, which was literally thousands of miles away. Transporting it was going to be impossible, way too expensive.
So while everyone else is freaking out, Gong just strolls in, takes a swig from his gourd, and starts laughing. He's like, "Don't worry about it, I got this. The logs will get here on their own." And of course, everyone just thought he was drunk and talking nonsense, as usual.
But then, a little while later, something really strange starts to happen. A deep, rumbling sound starts coming from the old well in the temple courtyard. The ground starts to shake, and all the monks gather around, totally confused.
And then, boom, a giant log shoots out of the well like a missile and lands perfectly in the square. Then another one comes flying out, and another. One by one, the massive logs they needed from Sichuan were being magically teleported through the well, piling up right where they needed to be.
The logs just kept coming until the entire temple yard was full of them. Realizing they had more than enough, Gong runs out and just yells, "Enough!" And at that exact second, one last log was halfway out of the well, and it just stopped, stuck right there. And famously, that half log stayed there for years as proof of his power.
This unbelievable story really gets to the heart of who Jigong was and what his whole legacy is about. He was so much more than just some crazy monk.
And this brings us right back to that perfect contrast from the beginning. On the outside, he was everything a monk was not supposed to be. But on the inside, where it really counts, he was a living embodiment of enlightenment, just boundless compassion, incredible power used only for good, and a true understanding of the Buddha's heart.
And that's really the ultimate lesson from his story. He proves that being holy isn't about the robes you wear, or the rules you follow, or the food you don't eat. It's about having a compassionate heart and using whatever power you have to help other people and to fight for what's right.
Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to chew on. If a drunken, chaotic rule breaker can be considered a living Buddha, it kind of forces us to rethink our own definitions, doesn't it? What does true enlightenment or just true goodness really look like? Maybe, just maybe, it looks a lot less perfect and a lot more human than we think.